Okay, so today is the day when this great French painter died on February 13th. So I thought of creating quickly some kind of incipient material uh, about a possible reflection between his painting and architecture in general. And I will focus particularly on the relationship between spirituality and sensuality, which is also present in his paintings. This was the man. This is Georges Rouault, and he's very famous for his paintings, but also for his prints. I think he was a very complex artist, and he deserves to be known very well, I think. So Georges-Henri Rouault was born in May, but died on the 13th of February 1958, was a French painter, draftsman, and print artist whose work is often associated with Fauvism and Expressionism. That's why I chose to also show the works of a few Expressionist architects. Uh, but by the way of this, I have to say that I searched for Fauvism in architecture, and there is no such a thing. So it's very interesting now that we have Fauvism in painting, and perhaps, well, mainly in painting, but no, not in architecture. But I think the idea to explore Fauvism in architecture could be a potentially a fruitful one. Fauve architecture would be, I think, an interesting addition to the many otherwise movements and currents in architecture. And I just show some paintings by him. He was a mystic, but he was a mystic who painted both saints, Christ included, and prostitutes. Sorry, I wanted initially to intercalate, to have images of his paintings and then images of an architecture of the present, mainstream architecture, which in my opinion is the opposite of his paintings, because it is without nerve, without fervor, without blood, without flesh, and without spirit. Most of the architecture that we build today is so-called civilized, but perhaps is too civilized in the sense that it became almost frigid. But his paintings are not frigid at all. Uh, Christ, but he's a Christ, you know, a melancholy Christ. And I like his paintings very much because, you know, even when he deals with a so-called religious theme, he's still a painter who addresses life in its viscerality as well, not just in its ghostly, so-called, you know, ethereal longings. He also painted clowns. So he has his universe is about you know, various aspects of reality. But I would say that his perceptions of life seem to be centered around these themes: Christ, the saint, the clown, and the prostitute. Uh, but there is more to it. It's some kind of a primal. You see this primal landscape, and look at that sun insinuating itself in a mystical way on the sky. He was also, I would say, some kind of an existentialist. A crucifixion, a portrait of a lady, another. Well, maybe it's a detail from the painting I showed earlier. Um, to women. Then here we have three characters. He seemed to like the theme of three people together, but in religion, Trinity, of course, the triad has a certain meaning. So I think his art creates the conjunction, the bridging between various fields. This is a self-portrait, but you can understand from his the expression of his face that he was would call today a troubled man, a melancholy. Maybe he had, I mean, most surely his own disappointments, like all of us do. I think his painting is rich, is complex, and addresses various sides of life. It seems, and his paintings also look a little bit like him. I mean, I see his self-portrait in several characters that he painted. Again, a crucifixion. Then we have, you know, sensuality. We have again figures looking at us, three clowns, you know, staring at us. We have even anticipations of, you know, forms of expressionism that lean almost towards the cunning. But why did I try to relate Rouault with architecture? Because I think architecture today, in good measure, misses the two maybe major sides or components of his painting: spirituality and sensuality. It's true that the sensuality in his case achieves levels of what might be called promiscuity. Like here, for example, the very fact that he you know, was preoccupied by the subject of depicting prostitutes, but here is the same man. So here is Rouault, and here is Rouault. So we have, there is also guilt, the primordial guilt. There is clearly spirituality and the quest for spirituality, but there is also, you know, the other side. So I was preoccupied with thinking about the two themes: sensuality and spirituality, or spirituality and sensuality in architecture. Both are neglected today, although we live in a so-called liberated world, but I think our buildings very rarely achieve that kind of almost pagan sensuality that the truth of the earth, in a way, claims or reclaims. You know, this, I searched on Google Images for promiscuous architecture or lascivious architecture, and I couldn't find anything. Nobody thought of, I found one or two projects, and I will show them to you a little bit later. Anyway, there is also a cosmic quality in a way, because when you clash, because it's about clashing, it's a clash between spirituality and sensuality, you get some kind of a turmoil there. It's a conflict, and it's a conflict, but that conflict could be very, very genuine and intense and fruitful. And the possible cosmic undertones could show up. Anyway, so again, what painter paints something like this and then paints a crucifixion? Or the judges. Here you have the judges, you know, the carriers of you know, ethical evaluation. He also painted sometimes flowers, but not as frequently. I would say that the two main themes of his work are spirituality and sensuality. And there is also, in some of his portraits, I would say that there is, although he was a French painter, but I think I see something Byzantine a little bit. I'm thinking of the mosaics of in Ravenna, San Vitale, or there is a certain mysticism there that it is Christian, but you know, from a much earlier time. That's why I thought that perhaps I should talk also about Justinian. I'm really complicating my time and my theme, because starting from Rouault, I would like to show Justinian architecture, then Otto Barning, Rudolf Steiner, and Hans Peltzing, three very important expressionist architects. And then show a sketch, a beginning of a material with a title Erotic Architecture. But all in all, his paintings, I think, have this force, this power that very rarely, I would say, is present in architecture, because architecture is so dedicated to the so-called civilization, and it loses the chance to also express existential dilemmas, or even spiritual dilemmas. We don't think about these matters. We just think about functions and to erect a building that functions in a certain way. But I think culture is much more complex. And painting is able to evoke this complexity much better than architecture. So now, very quickly, if you allow me, I will go to Justinian architecture, because I mentioned it. And yes, this is an attempt at cultural conjunction that maybe is just sorry, what did I do here? I was supposed to open Justinian architecture. Okay, from the beginning. Why is keep showing? I don't understand why it keeps showing this one. I'm agitated because. Okay, Justinian architecture, okay, here. All right, it works now. Now, from Georges Rouault, we go back a lot of time, many centuries, architecture under the Justinian's reign. And this is the Emperor Justinian. So he lived between 482 and 565. Was also known as Justinian the Great, was the Eastern Roman Emperor from 527 to 565. So almost 500, well, more than 1,500 years ago. His time when he was an emperor was marked by the ambitious, but only partly realized renovatio imperii, or restoration of the empire. A still more resonant aspect of his legacy was the uniform rewriting of Roman law, the Corpus Juris Civilis, which is still the basis of civil law in many modern states. His reign, I'm not sure how to pronounce this word, unfortunately, also marked the blossoming of Byzantine culture. And that's why I thought of showing this, because there is something in the paintings of Rouault that makes me think of the Byzantine culture. And his building program yielded works such as the Hagia Sophia. He's called Saint Justinian the Emperor in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Because of his restoration activity, Justinian has sometimes been known as the last Roman in mid-20th century historiography. He was married to Empress the Theodora, who came from a poor background, but she was a great empress, and here she is. And I do, maybe you see too, a certain relationship between the paintings, some of the paintings by Rouault, the frontality, almost bidimensionality. I see it connected with some parts of the Byzantine culture. Theodora was an Eastern Roman empress by marriage to the Emperor Justinian. She became empress when Justinian's succession in 1527 was one of his chief advisors. Albeit from humble origins, along with her spouse, Theodora is a saint in the Eastern Orthodox Church and in the Oriental Orthodox Church, commemorated in those 2 days. Okay, architecture. So Justinian was a prolific builder. The historian Procopius bears witness to his activities in this area. Under Justinian's reign, the San Vitale in Ravenna, which features 2 famous mosaics representing Justinian and Theodora, was completed under the sponsorship of Julius Argentarius. This is not the emperor. San Vitale in Ravenna, which is one of it is impossible to come across a history of architecture without showing the San Vitale. The Basilica of San Vitale is a late antique church in Ravenna. The 6th century church is an important surviving example of early Christian Byzantine art and architecture. It is one of 8 structures in Ravenna inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Its foundational inscription describes the church as a basilica, though its centrally planned design is not typical of the basilica form. And here it is. It is glorious indeed in its old age and primal truth. And the interior is sublime. And you would say, what does this have to do with Rouault? It does, I think, because you saw the paintings of Christ, and you know, there is, although you might say it's a forced relationship. I don't know. I like sometimes to attempt bridges that seem to be at first almost impossible to build. Because I think through the past, the so-called past, doesn't pass. The real so-called past doesn't pass. It's not something that was. It's something that was, is, and will be, if it is significant, if it was lived intensely and meant something. And in that sense, I think the painting of Rouault connects somehow with what we see here, these mosaics of in San Ravenna, in San Vitale in Ravenna. It's a glorious building and it's a glorious art, and it must be beautiful to attend the concert there, no doubt. You look at the eyes of these two almost sublime characters, and we saw the eyes on the faces of Rouault's paintings. It's almost the same expression, wandering, you know, in front of a life which is still unknown and maybe eternally unknowable. The plan of San Vitale, again, I keep, no, it is San Vitale. Sometimes I feel like saying something else, and I feel like saying San Ravenna, but no, it's San Vitale in Ravenna. Anyway, spirituality. There is here there isn't much sensuality, it's spirituality. Although when you look at the plan and the centrality, the roundness of the building, I think any great architecture, because it is vital, it's called San Vitale, because it is vital, it should have something biological in it, if not more than that. If there is something more than that, probably not. He also worked for Hagia Sophia. Maybe I shouldn't show also Hagia Sophia. I think we already saw a certain possible connection with Rouault, and let's focus on Rouault. So I will go now to Expressionist architecture, because besides the Byzantine connection, there is the obvious connection with Expressionism, because Rouault was also was an Expressionist painter. He was a Fauve, but he was also an Expressionist painter, and I will show now three important Expressionist architects. The first one I'm going to show is Hans Peltzing. This was a presentation I prepared some time ago. Started with Kevin Roach, which has nothing to do with Hans Peltzing, but we'll go to Hans Peltzing, a German architect, a very important German architect with powerful expressionist elements in his work. There is also Fritz Höger, and there are others, but I will talk about three of them. So Hans Peltzing, he lived, he was a contemporary of Georges Rouault. He probably would have never thought that one day there will be a talk about him and Rouault. This was the man, drawing, thinking, feeling some drawings, You look at his drawings, they are maybe not as powerful graphically or pictorially as the paintings of Rouault, but still they show skill and expressionism. Like here, even here, I would say it's expressionism, but it's also erotical. This image, this kind of space with this single column in the center, I would say this is an erotical space. It's not a promiscuous space, it's not a lascivious space, but it does have elements of sensuality. Right now, of course, it's an attempt I just brainstorming in a way, or heartstorming. I'm just moving around in circles around the theme starting from the pretext of Rouault and exploring other ways of doing architecture. Because I think our architecture today is often deprived of that earthiness, that rawness that Zaha Hadid aspired towards, but in my opinion, didn't achieve. Maybe if she lived longer, she would have, I don't know, or if she had a kitchen in her apartment, because I know in her apartment in London, she didn't have a kitchen. And in a way, I understand why, because she hated probably the association between the kitchen and womanhood or a woman. And I understand that very well, but an apartment without a kitchen is, I don't know. And I am far from being very appreciative of kitchens. Kitchens or chickens, I always have this trouble with chicken and kitchen, but you understand. Anyway, Hans Peltzing, nature, buildings, sulfuric acid factory in Poland. Look at this. It's almost an ominous architecture, and I would say the paintings of Rouault are also, at least in part, ominous. It's expressionist architecture, but I think it is powerful. Anyway, this is a build. I go quickly over it. He also built within the city, and they are not so telluric or some stage design for their golem for the movie. I mean, this is a Gothic. This is Gothicism. It's a Gothic sensibility at work here, and the Gothic could be perhaps associated to an extent with what I meant by the duality or dichotomy, even spirituality and sensuality. The irrational, no, the eruption of the irrational, the dark forces, golem, the visceral, the vortex, the uterus, the womb is dark here. These are spaces of darkness, of fear. There is blood, there is death, but there is also, an eros, which often is associated with thanatos, with death. And then we have the building, this incredible building, which unfortunately was destroyed, will arrive at that building. Some water towers, we already saw some images, but even these water towers have a certain darkness about them. And also a certain sensuality if we consider their forms. So they are just water towers, but I think they are architecture. They are not just so-called buildings. So this is Hans Peltzing. And once we arrive at that theater that was, unfortunately, again, this is too ample, the subject. I will go quickly because I would like to have an overview of a theme, and I don't want to get lost in too many details about this particular architect. This is the Grosses Schauspielhaus in Berlin, which unfortunately was destroyed. And this building, yes, you would say there is no relationship at all between this building and Georges Rouault, but I do see it because it is because of its expressionism, and also because of its theatricality, and because of the vertical dimension. The light coming from the top it has almost some kind of a spiritual meaning. This is another building designed by him, but it was never built. And back to this theater, which unfortunately was built, was destroyed, and I understood at one point it was all painted in red. So you can imagine this was a very powerful, sensuous, almost mystical experience inside this theater. And we see here now that column that supporting one central column here. There is a row of them. A very seminal, important work by Hans Peltzing, which unfortunately was ruined, was destroyed, was demolished. And I wonder for what reason, because it escaped the war. Okay, now we go to Rudolf Steiner. Or should I go to Barning? Yeah, let's mention a little bit, but Otto Barning I didn't yet. No, it's not here, but I have him. I'll go to Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner, maybe you know of him. He was a very important philosopher who also built, and he built several buildings. And what is going on here? Sorry, I'm confused. Just a second, please. Rudolf Steiner. Okay, I know what is happening. Rudolf Steiner, a philosopher, but a very interesting philosopher. So he was born. Actually, we'll pay homage to him on the 25th or 27th of February. Actually, on the 27th of February when he was born. Although I see there are 2 dates, but I'll settle for the 27th. Was an Austrian philosopher, social reformer, architect, esotericist, and claimed clairvoyant. Steiner gained initial recognition at the end of the 19th century as a literary critic and published philosophical works, including The Philosophy of Freedom. At the beginning of the 20th century, he founded an esoteric spiritual movement, Anthroposophy, with roots in German idealist philosophy and theosophy. Other influences include Goethe and science, Rosicrucianism. You know, the paintings of Rouault have, in my opinion, a strong mystical side. They have a clear interest in spirituality, with his depictions of crucifixions and Christ, and clowns that look sometimes like saints, and saints who look sometimes like clowns. Sorry, I said something which I should not have said. Please forgive the last phrase. And then sensuality, which is almost an interdicted sensuality. In the first, more philosophically oriented phase of this movement, Steiner attempted to find a synthesis between science and spirituality. His philosophical work of these years, which he termed spiritual science, interesting conjunction. No, you wouldn't think of science of being spiritual, but that's what he attempted to arrive at. So to apply the clarity of thinking characteristic of Western philosophy to spiritual questions. Differentiating this approach from what he considered to be vaguer approaches to mysticism. In a second phase, beginning around 1907, he began working collaboratively in a variety of artistic, please be kind and turn off the microphone, of artistic media, including drama, the movement arts. I hear an echo. I don't know if it's because of my machine here or not. I hear something. I have to turn off the microphone. I'm sorry. Sorry, Ioana. Okay, so Now I'm a little bit lost here. In a second phase of Rudolf Steiner, beginning around 1907, he began working collaboratively in a variety of artistic media, including drama, the movement arts, and architecture, culminating in the building of the Goetheanum. And you are going to see some of the buildings he built. I don't know. Okay. This was the man, Rudolf Steiner, a philosopher, but he built some very interesting buildings. And not so few. The need for imagination, a sense of truth, and the feeling of responsibility. These three forces are the very nerve of education, he thought. I hope you remember that. We remember this. The Goetheanum, he built two. The first Goetheanum was like this, but it burned down. And was a timber and concrete structure designed by Rudolf Steiner. He attempted the synthesis of diverse artistic media and sensory effects infused with spiritual significance. Again, it is the spiritual significance that made me think of Rudolf Steiner by the way of Georges Rouault. This is the building, the second Goetheanum. And there is spirituality, but there is also, I would say, sensuality because of the curvature of the walls. This is a chimney of a technical building, so to speak, but quite fantastic in its expression. Well, it took a philosopher to be like this, you know, because architects trained for many years in an architecture school are discouraged to build in this way or to imagine buildings in this way. A transformer house, he built both. And the Goetheanum is on the right, and this the transformers house that you see on the left. So this is the second Goetheanum, quite an impressive structure. But anyway, there is plenty of information about Rudolf Steiner on the web. We could talk, by the way, of him of anthroposophic architecture. This was the first Goetheanum, and it is clear here that he has spiritual concerns, but he also was attracted by biology. This is a kind of architecture. It is a kind of architecture which I miss these days. Yes, we have fluidities, we have curves, we can do a lot with parametrics and scripting and programming and so on. But what is missing, I think, is a certain, I call it darkness, which has to do with a certain level of tectonics and with maybe a different cosmological conception. I don't know. Maybe we neglect gravity. Maybe we became too affected by virtuality, and we lost this sense of heaviness, a heavy architecture. Heavy architecture, but with a lofty spirit. I would say often in our time we build a very light architecture, but with a very heavy spirit. Here we have perhaps I'm not saying that it's written in stone, but perhaps we have a heavy architecture, not so much here because of the painting and so on, but I was talking about what we saw before the arrival of colors. An architecture that is heavy, properly speaking, but with a lofty spirit. He was searching for a synthesis of the arts. That's what he was searching for. And here there are people, actually ladies, contributing to the building of the building. This is a model of the Goetheanum, and this is the building as it was built. He was able to infuse in people an exuberance, a creative exuberance, which is clearly present in, I mean, in order to build such buildings, you do need some impetus, if not faith per se, but at least the desire for faith. And these people had it. And they volunteered to build this building. It's in a way amazing that he built about almost 20 buildings, and he was not even an architect. He was a philosopher, but very interested in architecture. And you see there is something connecting with Hans Peltzing and with the Gothic elements, the Gothicisms of Hans Peltzing, and with a certain so-called darkness or spiritual darkness present in the paintings of Georges Rouault. Concrete, visceral architecture, quite interesting and convincing. Again, considering it was built not by an architect, but I think he was very good, very skillful. Yes, I would see here some of the characters of Georges Rouault's paintings climbing the stairs or descending the stairs. Some of them, maybe. Why is it that the architecture today doesn't have most of the time spiritual concerns or spiritual longings or aspirations? Why is it? And equally, on the other side, I don't think it has sufficiently convincing sensual aspirations. Somehow is devoid of both. Some furniture by Rudolf Steiner, which is very Rudolf Steiner. I mean, is the same person who built the buildings that you saw, who designed these, I would say, very impressive pieces of furniture. They are functional, but they are also sculptural. Well, they are probably very expensive because this is not plywood. This is, you know, the real thing. It's solid wood. But I think they are very convincing, very well done. And some artworks. He was a very interesting man. He, you'll see, he has a whole series of drawings done with chalk on blackboards. Sorry, I don't know what this is. The Power of Thought Pictures. Yes, the Rudolf Steiner's blackboards. So he designed with, he drew with chalks, you know, conceptual diagrams, but they are more, in fact, I almost insulted them by calling them conceptual diagrams. You will see them. They are very interesting, the blackboard drawings of Rudolf Steiner, done from 1919 to 1924. Knowledge of higher worlds. But you see, the knowledge for higher worlds should be accompanied also by the knowledge of the lower worlds. And that's what I meant by when there is spirituality and sensuality. And maybe it's unjust for me to call the sensuality the lower world and spirituality the higher world. The idea is to have both. Maybe we should abstain from calling them higher and lower, because here is already some kind of a judgment. I think we should stay away from these judgments. And here they are in an exhibition. I think it's a very impressive body of work. These blackboards with his tempestuous exalted and exalting sketches of Rudolf Steiner. I like them very much. This, I don't know exactly. I didn't analyze them. I don't have the necessary knowledge, but graphically they excite me. I think they are very interesting. They are indeed about marrying art with science, or spirit with science, or creating some kind of a spiritual science. And you can tell that there is a cosmic component, so to speak. There is something that transcends, the immediate reality. He was questing for wholeness, and maybe I will talk more about him on the 27th of February, when his birthday will be. Artă și cunoașterea artei in Romanian. Anyway, yes, it is about art, but it's also about knowledge. I love his chalk drawings. I think they are excellent. I mean, graphically excellent, artistically excellent. These works do show the ability to conceptualize intellectually, but also to express emotionally. It's clear that he lived very intensely, and these works show it. After all, between what is happening within us and what is happening outside of us is a close relationship. That's why I say all the time, we talk about the environment, but there is also a so-called environment within. There is a nature outside of us, and there is a nature within us. And between the two is a relationship, a strong relationship, sometimes troubled, sometimes less troubled, but they are related. They reflect each other in a way. That's why when I hear people, we have to take care of nature, I would say, yes, of course, but there are two natures. Is the one outside and is the one inside. And we have to take care of both. Anyway, I do think we need architects who get inspired by works like this one, for example, Rudolf Steiner, where you have a philosopher who is also a graphic artist and a builder of furniture, a thinker. It's about multidisciplinarity, it's about crossing frontiers, it's about fusion, it's about cross-fertilization. We are not taught in schools in this way, and I think it's tragic, because we become little craftsmen. But yes, you have to know a craft, but you also have to have the ability to connect with other fields. And now I will end. I don't have here Otto Barning, but I could have. Let me open Otto Barning too. I have it. Just a second. I just didn't open it here. Otto Barning. Where are you, Otto Barning? No, don't tell me you are not here. I thought I saved it. Just a second. Sometimes I get overwhelmed by my own desire to transcend the frontiers, and so it's Rudolf Steiner, Otto Barning. Maybe it's here. Let's see. Otto Barning. Yes, here. Okay, so because I plan to talk about him too, and let's do it then. So this is the third expressionist architect I talk about tonight, Otto Barning, a very interesting German architect who built a lot of churches. And he is known as the architect of churches. Here he is with Le Corbusier, and on the right is actually Hans Scharoun, another great expressionist architect, German expressionist architect. This is Barning, and we'll see some of his buildings. In the architecture schools, I don't think too many people talk about an architect like him, but that's a problem, I would say. Some drawings by him. You see even here the kind of architecture that connects in a way with Rudolf Steiner, connects with Hans Peltzing, and connects maybe less explicitly with the mental universe and the graphic universe and the pictorial universe of Georges Rouault, because it is a world that assumes spirit. Well, this is a church, but it assumes the world of the spirit in certain terms, the terms of you know, a certain darkness, the Gothic, and the irrational, the expressionist attempt of the architect to connect with the above, but also without neglecting the below, the so-called below. I will not insist. I mean, this is not a presentation about Otto Wagner. I would go rather quickly, but I would like to have a chance to say a few things about him, because I see a world that is neglected today and was not neglected by Rouault, was not neglected by Hans Peltzing, was not neglected by Rudolf Steiner, and was not neglected by Otto Barning. I think we can learn something from these people and apply to our time. But I hope I will arrive at the churches soon. But even here you see certain connections, even with Rudolf Steiner. It's a certain kind of architecture that today is rather neglected. Now, this is a block of flats. I will go quickly over it. It's here he had social concerns, not so much. It's a different program, but I hope I arrive at this is a chapel, but it's not so illustrative of what I would like to illustrate. Anyway, yeah, maybe I should not have gone into this with Otto Barning. Maybe it was not a mistake that initially it was not present on my list. With I'm searching for a certain church and I don't find it now here for some strange reason. I didn't look at this material in some time, but nevertheless, you see an architect. Yes, he built many churches, but not all of them illustrate my point. Unfortunately, there are two of them which do. Like, for example, here in a certain way, you know, it is a quest for spirit. It is a quest for the spiritual womb, which a church is supposed to be. And that explicitly, we don't do it very often. Maybe Imre Makovic in Hungary did it to an extent, but with some problems too, because it became a little bit too folkish, what he did. In my opinion, although he was influenced by Rudolf Steiner. Look at that tree, how it grows from within the building, or I mean, from the other side. Imagine it's some kind of strange. No, it seems it grows from the inside towards the outside. Anyway, a glorious tree, though. Yes, I think we had enough with Otto Barning. I still don't understand why I didn't arrive at that church I wanted to arrive at. Anyway, No, I will continue now with auto burning. This is a presentation that seems to be a little bit, not sufficiently organized, and maybe it's true. This tower, though, this tower connects with Hans Peltzig, and connects also, I would say, with Rudolf Steiner, and it connects also, I think, with Rouault, because it has, I would say, a certain mysticism. It's just a water tower, but you see, it's like a mask. It's a silhouette with a mask at the top, and it's something anthropos, let's say, sophical in this building, which is just a water tower, but it has a certain physiognomy that makes me connect it with what I mentioned before. It's an interesting building, actually, and I'm happy it's still alive. Now, I don't know what is here. It's another church. No, that's not what I wanted to see. This is another church. The expressionism, but the expressionism of auto burning is not truly illustrating what I wanted to illustrate. Anyway, now we go through it. And at least the last part of this presentation tonight is will create some kind of a balance, because I began presentation is just a beginning about what I call erotical architecture, because of the dualities present in Georges Rouault, spirituality and sensuality. Another church, but not as as illustrative for what I wanted to show. Anyway, I mean, he's an interesting architect, but I don't, now that I look at it, at his work now, I don't see it so connected with what I wanted to say. Okay, there was another church, but I see it's not here. And now I will present the last work tonight, which is my attempt at addressing this difficult subject, erotic architecture. It's just a beginning, really. It deserves much more than what I did, but it's a beginning. Because it is my claim that architecture today is neither spiritual nor erotical, truly. Yes, there is a lot of vulgarity sometimes and mimicked sensuality, but not truly in a fundamental way erotical. And it's also not spiritual. So in a way, the two extremes are not addressed, neither spirit nor sensuality. There are books, you see, I don't know what this is, erotic architecture. Yes, there are all kinds of, or it was an exhibition or something like this. Of course, there are elements of eroticism, but I think that that kind of eroticism, which can be felt near the temple of Hera, Hera's temple at Paestum in the south of Italy, where it was said that if an infertile couple spends a night there, they will become fertile. That kind of primordial eros is absent today, and is absent because we don't value any longer the earth in mystical terms. We don't think, when we pour the foundations of a building, nobody understands these days that we are perhaps committing something sacrilegious. The ancients, when they did something like this, they had a feeling, an immense feeling of guilt, because they were raping the earth. That's what the ancient men thought, that when they create the foundations for a building, they rape the earth, they rape Mother Earth. But no architect today would think in these terms. No, we have no problem to ravage the earth, as if the earth is, this insensitive matter that we have all the rights in the world to do whatever we want with it. I don't think it's like this, because we lost our wonderment vis-a-vis everything, vis-a-vis the sky, vis-a-vis the earth, vis-a-vis ourselves, and vis-a-vis each other. And as I said, the paintings of Rouault have both a dark sensuality and maybe also a dark, here and there, luminous spirituality, but they are both. we don't handle these so-called extremes. We are not interested in spirituality in architecture, strangely, maybe even when we build churches, and we are not interested in that dark, earthy, humid, primordial eroticism that the ancients perhaps knew something about. Now, of course, we have eroticism here in Oscar Niemeyer, rather convenient and graphic with a redness and with sinuous lines and so on. Of course, this eroticism has to be sublimated, it has to be abstracted, but I also think it has to be earthy, it has to be raw. And his architecture is interesting, but it seems a little bit otherworldly or a little bit science fiction, a little bit too sleek, but it has virtues. I think it qualifies to an extent to be called erotic architecture. This one, yes, of course, the Baroque is good at this, because of this, its curvatures and, the voluptuousness of the forms and the spaces and so on. Yes, the Baroque in general, I would say it's conducive or was conducive to expressing certain levels of sensuality. Now here you see a project by two young architects from Canada. They submitted this work for a competition I launched some years ago, a house for Lady Gaga. And I think they even have their own office called something with erotical architecture or something like this. Anyway, this is unfortunately the pictures, so you must excuse them. In the hurry to create this short presentation, I didn't have time to enlarge the text and the images, but you'll have a feeling. In essence, it's about a cube, almost like in a landscape designed by André Le Nôtre. But inside the building, you see Lady Gaga there, spreading her legs, and kind of like a new Athena Parthenos or Athena Palace, the new goddess. The goddess who is central into a kind of a new temple. Now, the new temple in their case is just a cube with many windows. But the idea to place a huge human body, or in this case, a female body, there in a very explicit kind of position says something about what they wanted to say. And here you see the perspective drawing. It's an interesting idea, though, to bring back the goddess or the god, even in scandalous postures. It's okay. It's transcending the human, actually. I mean, yes, Lady Gaga is a human, but she achieved this status of some kind of, super. I mean, she is, after all, a so-called superstar, and so they try to illustrate her status in the present culture in this way, in what they proposed. Now, I ask my question: how would a promiscuous architecture look like? Because the paintings of Rouault depict sometimes prostitutes. So, could we have a promiscuous architecture? What would that be? I searched; there are no examples, but we can see, yes, I mean, not intentionally made or designed promiscuous architecture, but examples of promiscuous architecture, unintentionally built, can be found in any place in the world, probably. Usually the periphery, in the darkness of the evening, and some unglorious quarter of a certain settlement. What about a lascivious architecture? Well, even here, I couldn't find examples convincing enough. But Jean-Jacques Lecoeur, who is associated often with Ledoux and Boulez, but he's less known than Ledoux and Boulez, he made some scandalous drawings. He was an architect, and his drawings are very fantastic and sometimes very charged erotically. Like, for example, here, it remained just a drawing, just an illustration, but it is an attempt to bring eros into the building. Yes, at the level of an illustration and nothing more than that. But the attempt is there. Here even more. This is a symbolic drawing which attempts to achieve what Rouault, let's say, I would hesitate to use the word achieved, but was able to make in his paintings, because here we have sensuality, but we also have spirituality, because she's a nun. But at the same time, we have perversion, because Le Coeur had maybe a strange, psychology or something. But the attempt, I think, is correct. Even Lady Gaga, because I showed before, she, I think I forgot exactly what, was it in Alejandro, or sometimes she even dresses as a nun, some kind of a sensuous nun. And yes, you could say she's sacrilegious, and sometimes perhaps she is to an extent, but the attempt is to unite spirituality, sometimes with a or with a darkness about it, or with a minus sign in front of it, maybe, and also sensuality, spirituality and sensuality, like here. And it looks like now I'll show you a project which I found on Sucker Punch Daily, Towards a Promiscuous Object. And it is an architectural project, but it is called object, maybe correctly. I usually hesitate to use the word object in order to describe a building, because a building, in my opinion, is more than an object and should be more than an object. And here it is. It's something above a highway. What can we say? It is a type of possible architecture that has a certain level of, viscerality, but I don't know. It's called promiscuous because it has elements of sensuality derived from, you see here, the inspiration for the project. Now, of course, there is the inevitable strawberry and all kinds of other things here. Yes, most of them deriving from the vegetal world, but from the fruits and vegetables. It's the agitation of the ferments of nature that generate this connection with what is named here promiscuity. And this is the building. There are other architects, especially with working with Maya. You can do all kinds of things kind of similar, even more, let's say, sensuous or, enticing in this way. The section and the elevation, though, is, I think, properly illustrated what I would like to be able to suggest, that it's possible to do an architecture that is charged, so to speak, erotically, but ideally should also have a spiritual component. So if you could do both, if it's not easy, because it is about uniting the opposites, conjunctio oppositorum. Okay, I finished for tonight. Maybe it was not the most inspired presentation I made, but it was a difficult subject.